The fog rolled in low that morning, wrapping the island like a secret that didn't want to be told. Long before Alcatraz became a museum, before postcards and tourists, before the ferry horns and camera flashes, there was a moment when the prison still breathed. Chains rattled. Boots echoed. Men stared out through steel bars at water so cold it looked sharp enough to cut. And on that morning, something felt different, like the rock itself knew its time was running out. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. The cell doors clanged open before dawn, the sound slicing through the silence of D-block. A guard walked the tier with his jaw clenched tight, clipboard tucked under his arm, eyes avoiding the inmates. Transfers were routine at Alcatraz. But this one wasn't routine. The men could feel it. When you lived on the rock, you learned to read silence the way other people read newspapers. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary wasn't just a prison. It was a threat. A promise made by the U.S. government to its most dangerous men. Here, you will not escape. Here, the ocean is your wall. Here, hope freezes before it ever reaches shore. The prison sat less than 2 miles from San Francisco, close enough that inmates could hear music drifting across the bay on quiet nights. Laughter. Potty horns. The sound of life continuing without them. That proximity wasn't an accident. It was psychological warfare, designed to remind every man inside exactly what he had lost. By the early 1960s, Alcatraz housed some of the most notorious criminals in America. Bank robbers. Kidnappers. Men who had stabbed guards in other prisons. Men who refused to follow rules anywhere else. The rock didn't rehabilitate. It isolated. And isolation was its weapon. Cells measured just 5 feet wide. A cot. A sink with cold water only. A toilet. Nothing else. No privacy. No comfort. Just steel and echoes. The walls sweated with fog. The wind screamed through the corridors at night. And the guards, outnumbered, underpaid, and always alert, worked inside a system built on control and fear. But behind that reputation of total dominance, cracks were forming. By 1962, the prison was under pressure. Not from riots or mass violence, but from something more dangerous: exposure. Maintenance reports were piling up. Salt air corroded everything. Steel rusted. Concrete cracked. Heating systems failed. The prison cost nearly 3 times more to operate than any other federal facility. Still, none of that explained why guards were suddenly acting nervous. Why files were disappearing. Why high-risk inmates were being transferred quietly, without the usual paperwork trail. The official story would later be simple. Too simple. But inside Alcatraz, the truth felt heavier. The men noticed food quality changing first. Smaller portions. Cheaper cuts. Bread that tasted stale before it hit the tray. Then came staffing shortages. Guards pulling double shifts. Fewer patrols at night. Doors left unlocked for seconds longer than they should have been. In a place where seconds could mean life or death, that mattered. Whispers started moving through the tiers. Not about escape, everyone knew the odds. But about something else. Something wrong. Something big. Alcatraz had always sold itself as escape-proof. The bay's currents were deadly. The water was freezing year-round. Sharks were rumored, though never confirmed. Even if a man made it off the island, the odds of surviving the swim were slim to none. Yet in June 1962, 3 men vanished. When guards discovered the escape, panic swept the prison. Beds stuffed with fake heads. Ventilation grates carved open with spoons. A raft stitched together from raincoats. The impossible had happened. The escape dominated headlines, but inside the prison, it created a deeper fear, one the public never saw. If 3 inmates could break free, what else had failed? Administrators launched internal investigations. Guards were questioned. Maintenance logs were scrutinized. And what they found was unsettling. Alcatraz wasn't just old. It was decaying faster than anyone had admitted. Saltwater had eaten into the foundations. Electrical systems were unreliable. Sewage lines leaked into service tunnels. The prison wasn't just expensive, it was becoming unsafe. But closing Alcatraz wasn't just a financial decision. It was a political one. The prison had become a symbol. Shutting it down would mean admitting failure, admitting that the federal government's most feared institution could no longer fulfill its promise. So the truth was delayed. Transfers continued quietly. Cells emptied one by one. Inmates were moved under the cover of routine paperwork. Guards were reassigned. Supplies dwindled. The rock was being hollowed out from the inside. For the men still locked inside, the atmosphere shifted. The prison felt haunted by its own future. Corridors echoed louder. Lights flickered more often. And the isolation, the thing Alcatraz was built on, became unbearable. Psychologists had long warned about the effects of extreme confinement. Sensory deprivation, anxiety, hallucinations. At Alcatraz, these weren't side effects. They were features. Men talked to themselves, counted cracks in the walls, listened to the foghorn like it was a voice calling their name. Guards watched as inmates unraveled, not violently, but quietly, slowly. And then came the order. On March 21, 1963, the final transfer list was prepared. No ceremony, no announcement, just a stack of names and a deadline. The remaining inmates were loaded onto a ferry before sunrise. Shackles clinked softly as they stepped onto the deck. Some stared back at the prison. Others refused to look. The cells were left exactly as they were. Beds made, books on shelves, rusted bars facing the bay. Alcatraz closed its doors that day. The official explanation cited cost, infrastructure, logistics. It was cheaper to build new prisons on the mainland than to keep fighting the ocean. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. What really shut down Alcatraz wasn't just money. It was fear. Fear of what the prison had become. Fear of lawsuits. Fear of another escape. Fear that the rock, once a symbol of absolute control, was now a liability waiting to explode. After the last ferry left, guards walked the tiers one final time. The silence was different without inmates. Empty. Heavy. The kind of silence that lingers long after the noise is gone. Alcatraz never held another prisoner. Today, visitors walk through those same corridors. They peer into cells and listen to audio tours. They take photos of rusted bars and peeling paint. But what they don't hear are the whispers that once lived there, the psychological toll, the quiet breakdowns, the fear that the prison itself was dying. Alcatraz didn't shut down because it failed to scare men. It shut down because it scared the system that built it. The rock proved that absolute isolation comes at a cost, not just to inmates, but to the institutions that enforce it. Control can rot. Power can decay. And even the strongest walls can be eaten away, not by force, but by time. Alcatraz stands now as a monument. Not to justice. Not to punishment. But to a moment in American history when fear built a prison, and fear eventually tore it down. And as the fog still rolls in over the bay, the island keeps its secrets, silent and unrepentant, watching the city that never quite forgets it's there. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more prison documentaries that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.